Hello, hello, and welcome to another exciting episode of Skeptics and Seekers Sunday Sermon. This is 4S. I'm David Johnson, and I'm joined by Sarah. How are you, Sarah?
Good. How's it going?
Excellent. Couldn't
Good.
be better. I have never been better in my life.
Fair dinkum.
What? What did you call me? Never
Fair
mind.
dinkum.
No,
I
I
think
don't want to
it.
know.
Oh, it's
But
Australian. I
please
think
stop
fair
calling me
dinkum.
that. Yeah, so we've got something to talk about today. We are going to be going through, well, it's not quite a sermon, is it? It is
No,
a
it's called
speech.
coming out. Coming out.
Yeah, but it's still a speech from an apologist who used to speak a lot, right? We're talking about Tyler Vela. Tyler Vela. I was saying Tyler Vela, but I heard him say his name once and realized I was wrong. Tyler Vela. And he has made some waves over the internet. I've been half following his story for a little while, and then I believe it was our very own Tyler from the boards threw it on the board, and I just said, okay, well, I wasn't really ready to do this one yet, but I guess he's forced my hand. I'm going to have to do this because we're going to start having conversation around it, and I want to go ahead and do this video and talk about it a little bit before the conversation really got stirring on SNS. And I wanted to save this conversation especially for your week of doing this because well, I think there's no one that I would rather talk about deconstruction issues with than you. I don't exactly know why that is, but you do seem to have a particular sensitivity on this topic.
Okay, let's see what we can do with him. Except that all I can say is I agree 100% with what he says, pretty much all the way through. So we'll see if
Well,
we
you
can
see, I have some
get a bit of
surprise.
meat off the.
I have some surprise disagreements with him.
Oh,
So, but little, very small ones, and very few. But I will say I understand him. So to set this up, Tyler Vela is or was a Calvinist who was very popular on the internet. I don't know if he was Matt Dillahunty popular, but he was very popular. Uh, a very popular internet apologist. He's very smart, very well spoken, and just what seems like out of the blue, this person who has many public debates and conversations as a Christian, as a Calvinist, suddenly came out with I'm not a Christian anymore. Now, that's not the same as he's an atheist. He's not an atheist. But he is not a Christian anymore, and he's made that public. He has deconverted and is publicly deconstructing. And that's one of those things that rocked the internet, at least our corner of the internet, a little bit. Um, I didn't know Tyler Vela's work very well, but here's one thing I do know. For like a couple of months, I think the time frame is 2 months or more, somewhere in that time frame. He had already come to the decision in his mind that he was no longer a Christian. And yet he was still appearing on shows, still defending the faith during a time when he has later acknowledged that he no longer believed. A lot of people have pushed back against that and said, "Oh, well, he was lying. He's a hypocrite." I'm actually going to push back against that pushback, but I'll do it later in the show. I would actually defend him. I know that I felt a certain way at the time that I found this out, and there were people on shows with him during that period who knew, whom he had confided with, who knew that he was no longer a believer, and they were still doing their shows as if he was a believer. So before we jump into this speech, and we're gonna take his entire speech, and I'll interrupt it accordingly. Do you have anything to say about that particular aspect?
Yeah, I mean, the poor guy's probably changing entire worldviews. So, I mean, if there's a transition period where, yeah, he sort of knows that that's what he believes, but it's not quite cemented in yet, I think you can't. It's probably going through the motions. It's lying a little bit, but I'm sure people who've identified as LGBT and haven't quite come out to their family and have kind of pretended that they're straight for a little while longer than they should and all that kind of thing, it's probably very similar. So I think you just have to cut him some slack. I don't think he means it as an absolute deception, but there's a period where it's probably with hindsight that he's sure that he didn't believe 2 months ago, but at the time, he's probably still working it out.
Yeah, I think the difference between the LGBT analogy is that the LGBT,
LGBT they
LGBT, right?
exist, David. They exist.
The difference is they're, as a rule, not going around telling people that homosexuality and or queerness is bad and evil. So they may be secretly queer, but they're not, by and large, taking a hypocritical stance. They're just in the closet. It would be different. So if there was someone who was telling people, oh, let's say Franklin Graham, as a a crazy far out example, we're preaching against the evils of homosexuality, and yet you find out that he's secretly homosexual. Let's just say
That's de rigueur. I mean, Ted Haggart. I mean, isn't that exactly what he got caught with his pants down with some lad when he's been preaching against homosexuality? So it happens quite a lot. But
right, but you see, that would be a problem, and
yeah, it's a problem. Yeah,
right, and so I think that just defending my LGBT friends and those who might still be in closets, there's nothing wrong with being in a closet and not telling the world your preferences. But what Tyler did, he wasn't in a closet not telling the world his preferences. He was pretending to believe something that he didn't. Even then, I'll still defend him, but I'll defend him a little bit later. Let's take a look at this. This is really interesting, and I just also want to let the audience know before we get going here, there are 2 more of these. And so Sarah will be joining me every second week this year and for the rest of her natural life on the show. And so for the next couple of weeks, we're going to deal with more Tyler Vela. I'm going to save those, especially for our conversations. But this is the one that kicked it off. And so you have to put yourself in the mindset of people who had been listening to Tyler, who were friends with Tyler, who knew him well, and then suddenly, boom, this happens.
Some upswings has been generally downward and away from any religious faith or
that
commitment.
Is not, that's not how it's supposed to start. Let's do it again.
Hello. What I'm about to say has been pulled mostly from announcements recently made on my social media platforms, with slight modifications and additions. It has become rather obvious to me from various events in my life that it's time to make public what my family and many friends knew already in private. The past year has solidified many things in my life and has also shown me that many things which I thought were solid were not. For the past 2 years, I've been on somewhat of a roller coaster with God and faith and religion, and that trajectory, while having some upswings, has been generally downward and away from any religious faith or commitment. My reasons for this are presently my own, though I will touch on some here. And I know speculations and accusations will come, though I think most will be loving, albeit disappointed. Yet I'm reminded of the sayings, to thine own self be true, and to go against conscience is neither right nor safe, and all that jazz. However, about a year ago, I was given some sage advice to not blow up the ship unless I was certain I had to. I'm at that point, and others have noticed the dichotomy and have started asking questions about it, which indicated to me that it's probably time to go public. I normally wouldn't, but since many of you have found your way into my life via my public appearances, or only know me through that, I thought it only fair. And for those who have not noticed the shift, I apologize in advance if this comes as a shock, especially to some of you with whom I'm close to and have not shared this with already. I thought it important to add this to the YouTube and podcast channels and feeds as well, since many watch or listen, but don't follow me on social media. So with that, I'm announcing at this time that I no longer feel comfortable identifying as a Christian.
Okay. So I'll pause there for just a moment just to emphasize this, because we might speak later, and I know that when I talk about this just to myself, I sometimes call him an atheist or a non-believer or something like that. He's not a non-believer. He is still a theist. In the same way that David Kimball Cook is still a theist. He's a non-believer. He's a non-Christian. But he is a theist of some kind. And Tyler is also a theist of some kind. And there may be, in the future, more explanation of what kind of theist he is, but he's not the kind of theist that Christians would be interested in. You know, he'd be more the kind of theist that maybe a Hindu is. And so most Christians wouldn't credit that with meaning anything. So let me just ask you, Sarah, are you some kind of theist?
I have no idea. I didn't identify as any of it. I had no idea how far this guy's in and how long he's been he says 2 months of kind of being a bit vague.
Yeah, actually, he said 2 years.
I'm fine with that, but I don't know how long or how big a following he's got, what he's been saying. I didn't realise I do remember he said he was a Calvinist, but or that he's specifically, scaring people with the whole elect sort of story, and then in secret kind of deconverting, because that's a wee bit, Ravi Zacharias, Zachari, kind of similarities in terms of being a bit of a hypocrite. If that's, you could level that at him, I suppose. But I don't know. I mean, I just take him as somebody just coming out of the closet, who's having to be honest because it's getting too big to bear, and he maybe still has some residue beliefs. And as for me, I don't know. I have no idea. I'm just agnostic mostly. Okay,
so you're agnostic, which is not a denial of the possibility of a God.
Yeah. It's not a question anymore, really. It's not something you need to necessarily. I mean, it's a question. Well, I'm just very vague about it. It's something you can toy around with, but I don't need to have to work it out.
Yeah, when I can show you now, when I realized that I lost my Christianity, I was still a theist.
Mm-hmm.
At least for a while. I believed that there still had to be some kind of God.
Mm-hmm.
So, that was foundational to me. That was mother's milk for me, and I didn't know how to think of the world any other way. And, I'd been arguing the existence of God for a long time. I had been studying apologetics. And so even though everything around that God belief fell apart, I still hung on to some kind of God belief that still made sense to me in the state that I was in at the time. So I would not have been agnostic at all. I would have been a theist. I knew there was a God. I just also knew I didn't know anything about this God. So everything I knew was wrong, and I didn't have any framework for figuring out what the truth was, because in losing my faith in Christianity, I also lost my faith in the Bible. And as it turns out, that was pretty much everything I knew about God. So I was kind of a blank slate while hanging on to God. So I actually feel where Tyler is right now. And I don't know how long he will be here. I don't know if he will always be in this state. And he's going to, make a bit of a defense for, his belief in God. But I would just say anyone listening to that, take it with a grain of salt. A lot of people who walked out the door didn't walk out the door because they stopped believing in God. They stopped believing in the Bible and the tenets of faith and that Christianity had anything right. They stopped believing in the infrastructure around God. They didn't necessarily stop believing in God all at once. So,
No, and it's actually easier to define what you don't believe in. So, for example, the evangelical Christian model kind of conservative thing, I can quite categorically say I don't believe in that. That's fine. It's easier to define it by what you don't believe in rather than what you do believe in. And also it's stepping stones, isn't it? You can't just let go of a God belief like in one go. You let go of the evangelical aspect or some really hardline doctrines, and slowly, bit by bit, you'll kind of step away and probably go down a materialistic or idealistic view one way or the other after that. But I think it takes time. I think all these things take time, and I think you're not in the same page in every aspect of your view of it at any one time. It's not just binary on and off. It's like sometimes I do believe, sometimes I don't, and sometimes I would like to believe, so do I still? And I think it's just we're more complex than just a binary I believe in God. And then you start throwing up things like, well, what is God? What do you mean by God? And it all becomes a bit flim-flammy, and you have to roll with it for a while. And I think the poor guy's just decided that he realizes evangelical Christianity / Calvinism, the worst kind, is something he doesn't want to pursue, or that doesn't resonate with him anymore, and he's probably still finding his way. So let's see what happens.
Okay. One other thing before we hit play again, we can observe that Tyler is in a unique position. He had a platform on the internet, an internet platform, which he still has, by the way. He had an internet platform and an audience of people that he could talk to very easily all the time. And so when he makes this change, he can do this kind of public denunciation of faith. But most of us, when I say us, I mean the community of people that I know who have deconverted and are in the, on the various phases of deconstruction that we are, didn't have that nice, clean opportunity. Most people don't have that nice, clean opportunity to make a clean break. I mean, one day maybe you decide to stop going to church. You've been going to church every week, and then every other week, and then once a month, and you've come to grips that you don't believe anymore, and you don't really need this community anymore, and so you stop going, and that's just it. You just stop going. There's no announcement. There's no way to tell the world that you have deconverted. And if there was a way, you probably wouldn't avail yourself of it. You just slip quietly off the rolls of your local congregation. And so the internet has made this all very different. People do have ways to address their deconversion publicly and to find communities to talk about it and decompress this religious burden that they have had. So there is a difference. There are people, the vast majority of people, who deconvert and no one ever knows it. And then there are these conversations, which are only possible really in our time when the internet is prevalent and when there's so much focus on religion and non-religion. And I think that the decline of religion also makes this a very important time for people to be able to have a voice on this subject. So Tyler is really kind of in a unique position. And even though when I deconverted, I was a little bit early to the game, I went and made a blog. It's called Beyond Religion. You can still find it. Kind of talking about my thoughts and my journey out loud. My parents found out about my deconversion through that blog. They didn't read it themselves. One of our friends saw it. I used to link my blog to my Facebook page. That might have been stupid.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's how that happened. So if you're out there and you're thinking, I'm going through this too, but I'd like to talk about it, and I'd like to maybe have a non-judgmental community to share this with, Skeptics and Seekers .squarespace.com. You can shoot me an email, skepticsandseekers@gmail.com. I answer every one of them. Let's hear from Tyler.
At least not in the intrinsic evangelical or religious sense. Philosophical theist, sure, possibly even theistic humanist of the Renaissance variety, even a theologically conservative reformed philosophical theist at that, as confounding as that may sound to many who are in the know and reformed or even just systematic theology. Beyond this, I do not have all the answers.
Yeah, by the way, I didn't understand any of that word soup he just
Good.
said.
For most. All I can do is put a sign on the steeple which reads church closed, and a sign on me that reads work in progress or closed for renovation. I fought for a long time against the growing tide of doubts and reservations and honestly apathy and discontent, but found at the end of the day that the more I fought, the more acute they became, like an existential Chinese finger trap for which the more I struggled to free myself from, the worse it became. For those who may be bold or crass or just curious, I'll address some of the concerns. No, this is not due to some deep unrepented of sin or addiction. No, my Calvinism or determinism didn't drive me to it in some fatalistic dash. In fact, they kept me motivated and seeking God and committed to a sanctified effort far longer than I would have had I not held those views. And by the way, I'm still a compatibilist. And no, I'm definitely not an atheist. No, I don't hate the Bible. I don't think religion poisons everything or any of that nonsense. I lost my faith, not my brain.
This is my least favorite line of the entire thing. If you are an atheist, if you're the place where you disbelieve is that you no longer believe that God exists, that doesn't mean that you've lost your brain. Right? That you don't have to go there. And I understand that he's in this place. I was in this place too. I might have said the same thing. I did say the same thing in different words when I first was honest about my deconversion. But I was wrong then, and Tyler is wrong now. And so this is just the phase where he is, and there is absolutely nothing epistemically wrong with you. You haven't stopped seeking truth. You haven't become stupid if you no longer believe in God. And I don't appreciate the implication there. He's trying to salvage as much of his dignity and make it as easy to go down for all of his followers as possible. It's very traumatic to have a Christian leader that you believe in just announce one day, I don't believe in God anymore. All right, so maybe there's some sensitivity there, but I think the line takes away from an otherwise powerful statement that he's making. Okay.
I still find Christianity and the Bible to be beautiful, meaningful to the human experience, and some significant sense true. But I just cannot remain tethered to the mast and pretend that I can, want to, or will order my life by the narrow precepts, though.
Okay, wait a minute. In what way is Christianity true, but you can't abide by it?
The whole love wins, that kind of thing.
How is that Christianity?
Sorry?
How is that Christianity?
What, Jesus' message in general and some of the
Jesus's
ideas.
message in general has
He's
nothing
got
to do with love winning. I mean, I'm glad that I have Peter on the show. Welcome to the show, Peter. It still doesn't work. Love wins is not a message of Jesus. It's not a message of the gospel. It's not a message of Christianity. I don't know where that comes from. It's a very nice saying. I like the idea of it, but love loses all the time, 7 days a week. It wins some, it loses some. I don't see anything metaphysically necessary for love to always win. And knowing the message of Christianity, at least the form of it that I'm familiar with, I just don't see any necessity for love wins to be a part of it. But if you want to say love wins, I'm okay with that. I just don't see why that wouldn't be called Christianity. So I don't. And by the way, if this is what Tyler thought was Christianity, then he wouldn't need to say, but I can't live by the narrow precepts of it, because this would be Christianity to him. So I don't think that's what he means at all. And it just seems like he's saying something fairly contradictory here as he processes this. On the one hand, he's saying, in some ways, I believe Christianity is still true. And with the next breath, I can't live by its precepts.
Again, it's probably rejecting conservative Christianity and evangelicalism, and just accepting some of the core concepts that you find that you can pick off the bone that seem palatable. Well, not just palatable, but a good endeavor. Like, not love wins, but okay, goodness is worth pursuing. Love is a good thing. Those kind of thing. That's what people mean by love wins, I think.
Sure, but you don't need Christianity for that.
No, you
but,
don't. No.
Yeah. And
I don't think
could,
he's saying Christianity. He's just saying those aspects of it, if you want to call them Christian, because Christians have been often identified with the loving missionary and all that kind of thing. Right? Whether you agree with it or not, but I think he's just trying to hold on to those aspects of it.
So I'm just going to jump the timeline a little bit. Around my birthday, you and I will be in discussion again. We'll be talking about the third and final Tyler Vela video on this subject. He very clearly denounces any kind of liberal or progressive Christianity.
Okay.
And so this is partly why I can speak as strongly about this and about what I believe Tyler is not saying. I have jumped the timeline. So
I am not party to this information. I came out of the closet.
So when I was listening to this earlier today, before jumping the timeline, I was saying exactly the same thing that you were, but no, he kind of rules that out later. We'll talk again when I'm 53.
Its general equity is admirable. So what's next? I have no clue, and that uncertainty, which used to terrify the control freak in me, is actually part of what led to the change. I have no idea what's next. I studied this for decades, and honestly, I still love the discussions and the grand thoughts and the debates and significant explorations. So do I walk away from it all? Do I close up shop on the podcast and YouTube, debates and blogs, research and writing? How do I continue in good conscience without it becoming purely academic? Or maybe it does become that. Or maybe it becomes one non-religious person seeking the truth and beauty and significance in something he no longer affirms. Many have gone that route before me. Again, I have no idea. What are my beliefs on this or that now? It depends. On some things, I'm sure, and I've worked out some of it. On others, I'm still reconstructing and working through the issues. On others, I have no clue yet. I'm still thinking it through, and much will likely fade or change colors in the wash as I work out consistency again. For now, I'm walking in love and honesty and pursuit of truth and just enjoying the grand thing we call life with family and friends and those with whom I hold near and dear.
And let me just say that I think that's all anyone need commit to do. And you don't need to rebuild some kind of theology. When you walk away, a lot of times what happens with people, once again, this depends on how deep they were in religion, what kind of religion they were in before. they seek some kind of analog to the Christian experience that they had, except without the religious part. The UU, I think, largely exists for that. The Unitarian Universalists, or Universal Unitarian, that's what the U stand for. I get confused as to the order, but the UU is what they call themselves. Um, are a great landing place for people who have left traditional religion but can't leave the trappings of it. And I stopped by the UU for a while myself on the way out. It was delightful. I highly recommend it. So, um, which might surprise people to hear. It was great. But at some point I realized, I actually don't need that either. And I ultimately think it's kind of a mistake. I recommend it if you're one of these people who needs that sort of thing. But I ultimately think that a clean break is better and healthier. We don't need atheist church. The thing is, we don't need church. We don't need to jump into some different worldview. We don't have to go from Christianity to humanism. It's not necessary to do that. What we need to do is walk in love and peace and care for our family and our environments and our surroundings and be the best human that we can be in our society. That's really all we need to do. And we don't need to go through and kind of rebuild this kind of theology, non-theology type of worldview up again to replace the thing that we had.
I think you do. I think because you become the best human you can be in community. You have to bounce ideas off people. You have to have rough edges knocked off you with other people. You need to have somebody hold up mirrors to you, and communities do that for people. So that's how you become the better person. And once you've lost it all through a deconversion or deconstruction, then it takes a bit of time to work out what's important. And ultimately everybody seems to be coming back to this thing, which is, kind of treasure life, experience it, be good to the people you know and love. And it just takes a bit of time because you've been given a different narrative when you're in Christianity. You've been told it's worship and praising God and following His word and working out what his plan is for your life, and you've been given all the instructions, and then suddenly all that's taken away. What are you going to do? You've got this vacuum that you've got to fill and rebuild up, and that is a massive part of the deconstruction process. Is working out, sifting through stuff and going, I'm jettisoning that, I'm keeping this. And for some people, it's a bit more of the Christianity model than, if you've been given a fairly healthy view in the Christian model of, God is love and He accepts and He wants all people to be reconciled to one and all those kind of things, you're going to have an easier time to just sort of think, well, I'll give up some of the doctrines and the Bible as being literal and all those kind of things much more easily and just hold to those core beliefs than you are somebody who's having to jettison everything because it was just toxic. So I think it really depends on the individual how you're gonna deconvert. No, I don't know. There's no right way. There's no right way. And I think if he's got to go through a kind of stepping stone period, then it's kind of to be expected. But I haven't listened to the other two videos, so once I have, I could hate on him as well if I need to. Don't worry.
Yeah. Well, look, I don't disagree with what you just said, except for the parts that I don't agree with.
Well,
But no, I think that we are, in fact, saying similar things despite the the disagreement. I personally don't need to put together some kind of infrastructure that mirrors my Christian infrastructure. I don't need to replace brick for brick. I get rid of that thing and I put something there like it, but that is secular instead of religious. I'm fine getting rid of the whole structure, and I think a lot of people would be fine without the structure. I don't need that. I turns out I never needed that. But
What do you
there,
call the structure community? I mean, if you lost all your Christian friends, you're going to build another community of secular or
not
whoever friends.
necessarily. I didn't have a lot of Christian friends in the first place. Some that I did, I held very dear to be
Hmm.
sure. But I was never one of those people who was all that plugged in to community for most of my life. So I was actually pretty happy getting rid of the cliquish infighting of
Yeah.
what so much of the Christian community is. The Christian
Hmm.
community isn't all that for
No,
everybody. It
but
is
it's
it is
often.
for some people, right? So there,
Yeah.
but it's not for everybody. There are plenty of us who were there our entire lives, and were always kind of outsiders in this
Hmm.
community. So I was happy to be shed of it for the most part. Like I said, there were some friendships that were dear to me that it hurt me to walk away from. But by and large, yeah, I was not the plugged in kind of Christian, as deeply embedded in Christianity and the church and church politics as I was on a deeply personal social level. I was not, and
Hmm.
I don't think that the church served me well in that way. And so, yeah, I was happy to be without it, and I think that there are plenty of people who can. But for those who need that, who are built a different way than me, say you,
Hmm.
who seems to be a very social person, uh, things like the UU and other types of non uh, overly religious communities are valuable, and
Hmm.
I'm not knocking that. You can have that. You can assess your own needs and have it. You don't have to go to church because some Bible says you've got to do it. You can go to some kind of community if you in your own rights believe that it would be helpful for you. No God needs to tell you to do it. And by the same token, if you feel like it's not useful for you, you should get rid of it. And you shouldn't
Hmm.
try to reflexively rebuild the stuff that you had just because it's stuff that you used to do.
No, I mean, I agree. You don't have to rebuild it, especially, but I think the community aspect of it, of just having some friends, is and if you lose a lot of them from leaving church and things, you're going to want to build them up in another capacity. And for him, it's just that he can't quite let go of the whole theism thing right now. He needs to have a stepping stone between the two. It's too big a deal to let it all go in one go. You have to have stepping stones.
Yeah,
I
no,
think.
I completely agree. And he didn't stop what he was doing. He's still doing internet shows. Right?
Is he
Uh,
on
yeah,
on
I think
apologetic?
so. Not on apologetics, but he's doing. Look, we'll get to it. You'll see.
Oh, okay.
But
I
yeah,
literally
yeah.
have
So he
one episode, and I don't
this
know any
type of
more.
deconversion happened um, while he in this era while he's an internet star. Well, he can still be an internet star. It's just a
Yeah.
different kind of internet star. Amy Grant didn't stop necessarily believing in God, although she did stop being the kind of Christian that she was. But she used to, she was one of those early big Christian superstars who went secular. She
Did
didn't,
she?
she didn't,
Oh,
Amy Grant, oh yeah, she didn't stop singing. She just
uh-huh.
stopped singing for Jesus.
We still claimed her as one of our own for a long time.
Yeah.
She was one of the. She's a Christian. She gotta be supporting Amy Grant. So okay, she left it, or did she?
Oh,
Okay.
yeah, yeah, a long time ago.
Oh,
Uh,
I didn't know this.
long time ago.
Now,
Oh,
some of you have asked me a lot of follow-up questions. Again, this has been on social media for about a week now. I'm not looking to answer all of everyone's questions, and in some cases, I do not have all the answers, as I've said. However, many are asking the same questions, and there seems to be a bit of water cooler effect happening. First, I appreciate so much of the kindness, love, and support from many, even people I've never spoken to, who knew me from the content I put out. I even appreciate the attempts to re-evangelize and call to repent. I know it all comes from a good place in people's hearts, and I do not think it's condescending or judgmental. I get it.
Okay, so I'm just gonna jump in right there, real quick. I despise the people who come in and try to re-evangelize. I understand it. I get it. But it is a type of desperation, and it stinks of high heaven. If someone loses their faith, uh, it requires some kind of arrogance, I think, to make you think that you can ride in like the Calvary and go save them. Now, the Holy Spirit, he can't do it. He's been sitting there indwelling with him all these years, and they still walked away. The Holy Spirit can't do it. God can't do it. But you take it upon yourself to go and save this lost soul. This evangelistic impulse is rotten to the core, and I truly despise it. And it's also a kind of a denial of a person's autonomy. Okay, so this person has made a decision for his life that you don't like. Now you feel like you've got to go fix him so that he doesn't make that decision or unmakes that decision because it offends your sensibilities. Screw you.
It is refreshing to come across Christians that are secure enough in their faith to who just go, okay, that's where you're at, that's fine, who aren't threatened by it, and they are few and far between because most of them will try and bring you back in. And again, as you say, you understand it. You do remember when somebody walks out of the faith. For you in your worldview, it's that they're going into the evil side and you want to drag them back into the light. So it comes from a good place. I commend that guy though, Tyler Vela, because he seems to have got through the angry stage pretty quickly on the whole thing and seems to be very gracious towards people, whereas that is quite difficult. It's like a total denial of your experience, of what you've researched, the pain you've gone through. It's a bit like total, you need to be at least believed when you're going through this, never mind affirmed or not agreed with, but at least people understand you, and you feel very lonely when you're going through a deconversion. So I think he's good to say he's okay about it. He seems to be going straight to the accepting that people are coming from a good place, which I think ultimately they are, but it is infuriating.
Yeah, I think he's being very kind-hearted. It's only good from a certain angle. It's largely not good, though. It's not a good place to be in when you feel like you've got to cowboy up and save everybody. This savior messiah complex. It's easy to look at that on the surface and say that's a good place. It's not a good place. It's a bad place. It's a mental disorder, really. I mean, we call it a messiah complex for a reason.
But it is their problem, not yours. Do you know
That's
what I
right,
mean?
but it's not
They're in a bad place
it's not
with it, and
healthy
they
though. It's not a healthy mental state to be in. You're always John Wayne, got a cowboy up and save somebody's soul, is not a healthy mental state,
no,
even for
it isn't.
Christians. So that's really what I mean by that. Now, having said that, and given this impassioned rant, I will tell you that I am going to move to a place with 4S where I'm actually going to invite Christians to come with their best attempts at conversion, persuasion, reconversion. I don't want to hear ridiculous philosophical arguments that don't
Mm-mm.
matter, right? That's irrelevant. Nobody converts based on the Kalam. I don't
No.
care how good of an argument you think it is. That is not the stuff that persuades. And so I'm going to be doing a bit more focus on deconversion, but I also want the Christian to have something to do. I think in the past I have said this sort of thing about evangelism, and I think that has the net effect of kneecapping the Christian when they come into SNS because now they don't have anything to do. They can only talk about things that don't really matter because they don't want to be shut down for making an altar call. I invite the Christian to make their best altar call. I don't want to argue against a kind of academic Christianity that nobody actually in the pews understands or believes anyway. It's just a waste of time. And for those people who are sitting on the fence, quoting C.S. Lewis is not going to get them off the fence. That is not the stuff of salvation, no matter how meaningful you think that stuff is. And so I do want to move into a phase where we can talk about the stuff that actually matters. And Christians, if what you really want to do is convert the recently deconverted and persuade, I don't want to take away your tools for doing your best persuasion. If you're going to be in the conversation, you need to be in the conversation at full strength. And I'm not going to try to kneecap you or to make you stick to arguments that even doesn't matter. I want to talk about things that really matter, things that persuade. I want to talk more about things that on the skeptic side, things that don't persuade us, things that we jettisoned and why. And maybe if we can foster a little bit better conversation, Christians can maybe understand how to make a better message or a more persuasive message, and we can start hearing one another. And I think that at the end of the day, it's not going to lead to, churches filling up again. I think it will lead to better understanding, and we can build a new kind of relationship between people of faith and people not of faith. We don't have to see each other as the enemy. We're not the enemy. You're not the enemy. And so here I am, naive enough to believe that I can make a difference on the internet. And that's the difference we're going to make. So I hope you join me in the future as I flesh that out a little bit more. So never mind my rant against evangelism. Tyler, take it away.
However, many seem to think that I'm in a bad place now, that somehow this is a right now decision because they think that I'm currently struggling. They want to pray for me and hope I find peace in this struggle and turmoil right now. That's just inaccurate. I'm actually in a really good and healthy place, probably the most peaceful, healthy, and holistically happy place I've been. I'll make my feeble attempt to explain below, but my deconversion is happening almost because my faith was of no value or help during the crisis I went through. And so as I've healed and grown, I found it to be something that did not fit me anymore, something that was not authentic to myself.
Okay. I can't help myself, Sarah. I'm sorry. So to the end of producing this better kind of conversation and focus on deconstruction and possible reconstruction, I think that what Tyler said is very important, and Christians need to hear it. And so I can't say this enough. Folks, when someone announces their deconversion, when it's so strong, when the impulse for deconversion is so strong that you find out about it, that they tell you about it, it's set in pretty well. They are not in a bad place. Do not try to swoop in as if they are in turmoil, and don't come in all pastoral like to try to ease the pain of their turmoil. They're not in turmoil. They're okay for maybe the first time in their life. Their turmoil is you. You are the thing they're worried about. You are the only wild card in their life. Their life is settled. Their conscience is settled. Their mind is settled. They're at peace. The only thing that interrupts their peace is the thought of having to deal with you. And so when you come in, that way, assuming that, oh, poor thing, they must be in such turmoil, you are making a huge mistake. It's like a person who comes out as gay. They're not in turmoil. They have dealt with the turmoil privately. They've come out. They're at peace. You are the one in turmoil. Don't visit that on them. And the only thing in their life they're worried about is how to deal with the people in their lives who won't accept them. So Christians, don't be that person.
They don't like to hear that you actually feel like you're in a better place and that life is better and sweeter and more exciting and just more open and yeah, a greater peace and a greater feeling of being alive than you've ever had before. So they don't like to hear it, which I understand. But it's the reality of most people who deconvert. They go through a period of almost euphoria that it's so much better than where I was before. Deal with it.
Yeah.
Deal with it.
The weight is
pretty much
lifted.
everybody.
It's lifted for them, and what you represent is the weight that you're trying to place on their shoulders. This is how you appear to people like us who have deconverted. And I can also tell you this from the perspective of someone who's deconverted and spoken to, maybe hundreds of people who have deconverted. They don't want to end their relationship with you. You need to not take their deconversion personally. They don't dislike you. They're not repudiating you. I know it feels like they are repudiating you. This is not about you. And if you handle this right, you can maintain a friendship that's valuable to both you and them. The thing that destroys the friendship is not their deconversion. It's you assuming that they need you to do something about it. And really what they just need you to be is their friend. So, okay. There we go.
Like when you've lost weight and are more healthy, but then none of your clothes fit right anymore and are actually uncomfortable to wear. So faith never came easy to me to begin with, which I guess is an important trend to know. I grew up in a non-religious home, and after becoming a Christian, the Christian subculture and some of the worldview never sat well or comfortably with or on me. It's not that I rejected it or refused to affirm it. I did affirm it. It was just always surreal, but I muddled through the best that I could. However, after my divorce, it became almost intolerable at times.
Bam, 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 bam. There it is. There it is. I can hear the Christian. The divorce. The divorce. We didn't know about the divorce. That's why you left. He makes it clear that that's
he wants
not.
to do some sinning somewhere.
Yeah. John Loftus had a similar experience, except, I say similar experience. He went through a divorce, and that was the catalyst for him leaving the church, because the church, especially the denomination that he was in, which was the denomination I grew up in, takes a dark view of divorce, let's say, and they don't really care what the circumstances are. Never mind the fact that many of them are sitting up in the pews, divorced, remarried. They take a dim view of that, and so I know a lot of people are going to hear this divorce and say, "Yeah, gotcha. That's it." It's not. He talks about that, and shame on you for making that the central issue, because people of faith who have a great relationship with God often don't have great relationships with the spouses they choose. And divorce happens, and that doesn't have to break up other relationships. And it's just a nasty kind of impulse to say, yeah, that's why, you had this sinful attitude and you got divorced, and, you walked away from everything that was sacred. Now, I would also say this. and I would like your input on this, Sarah. I don't know if you've thought about this before, but I would actually say that marital trouble that leads to divorce is a good reason to walk away from your faith. Now, this is very controversial, so let me just spin this out a little bit. What Christians often say, I know you've heard this many times before. Natalie used to say this. I got to get her back on the show. That God paired her with her mate, that God helped her find the right person. Christians talk this way, you know. Maybe someone who's single and is hoping to marry, Christian will often, in a well-meaning way, say, God has someone for you, and you just need to be faithful. And so they have this kind of pseudo worldview belief idea that God is matchmaking, and that he's not going to match you. If you're faithful to his will, he's not going to match you with the wrong person. And so if it turns out that you are matched with the wrong person, it is kind of a God problem, because what it shows at the very least is that God didn't match you with the right person. It doesn't necessarily mean that there is no God. Maybe it means that the claim that God cares about who you marry and is involved with that, maybe it shows that. But if you are a part of a culture that tells you that God joins people together and that God has a plan for marriage and for you, and it turns out that you marry someone who is abusive to you, that's a strike against God. It is a legitimate reason to alter your worldview toward a religion that teaches you that.
It's a good crisis. I would have thought that definitely highlights some of the weaknesses, that either God doesn't help you through it, but I would also say it would mean that you would question whether you heard right, because let's be honest, if you're getting married in a Christian environment, you're going to do a lot of praying about whether this is the right thing, the right one. It's a big decision. So it would certainly put into question that you probably heard wrong, and then that would send a whole load of dominoes effect down. So in terms of whether you can trust, whether you can hear God properly, and what constitutes God talking to you. And as you say, you normally think that God is a big supporter of marriage, so would try and do anything to try and keep that marriage together, when the reality in human terms is that it's sometimes not possible. And so again, it just sets a whole load of domino effects. So a divorce or a relationship breakdown, I think, is not unusual for it to spark a crisis of faith. But it can do it the other way. You might then find Jesus because you've had a divorce and you were secular, and you think that Jesus is a better person to love than a fallible human. So it can swing you both ways in terms of where you'll end up. But I don't suppose it's necessarily this guy's problem. I don't know any reason for his divorce. Does he ever go into any of the reasons why? Is it to do with the faith, or just...
Well, he has something vague that he says right now.
But I still committed to it. Though I struggled with my faith in God's love and forgiveness and what mercy and grace meant during that time, I almost went Pascalian. And even though I didn't feel anything, I doubled down and prayed more, read the Bible daily, went to church, and did all the things that one should do to rekindle their faith and trust in God, even when walking blind in a hurricane. Here, I also want to clear something up that people seem to misunderstand so far about my announcements. Not to justify or explain myself as some need to be understood. I don't have to do that. I'm totally comfortable with people not getting it. But I want to bring it up because it serves as a good example where those of us who deconvert could be potentially hurt further by the church, because it hears something and then it fills in the blanks with its own narrative. But it's not our narrative. I've noticed this and reflected how the story of my deconversion that I hear and see from others, it's not my story. It's kind of like the Amazon version of the book. It's sensational with high emotional punchiness, but still not true to the book.
Okay, so I thought he was going to get to it sooner, so I will just say, he does mention unfaithfulness in the marriage, but he doesn't go into details. So
Okay.
whether it was his unfaithfulness or
Just
the
maybe,
unfaithfulness
yeah.
of his wife. So there may be some other place, but he did kind of mention that offhandedly.
Hmm.
So I just wanted to get there, and I didn't want to get further into the thoughts without saying anything. Now, I will tell you, I'm pretty lucky in that I haven't run across too many people, well, kind of because of the way that I came out, but there weren't a lot of people who came to me with some version of why they thought I deconverted. So I didn't have to deal with that much.
Hmm.
The One of the few times when I did deal with it, and I mention it because someone might say, "Yeah, didn't you do a show with Teddy on that?" Yes, I did. So Teddy, bless her heart, um, i- is one of those people who is convinced that she knows why you left. She knows, and given just the right opportunity and enough time to talk to you, she can make you admit it. And
Hmm.
there are a lot of people like that. And I don't have any animosity with Teddy over that. I love Teddy. She's dead wrong. Um, and I think that that was abundantly clear in the show that she did. But it's part of this. She's one of the Christians that will say it out loud. I think a lot of Christians feel that way, but they're too afraid to say it out loud. They think that they've got their finger on the pulse of you. They think they know why a person would walk away. It can't be for good reasons, right? And so they've got this set of straw man bad reasons in their mind that have to apply to you in some way because it is too much and too difficult for the Christian to accept the idea that a person
Hmm.
walked away from their faith for good reasons.
Exactly. That's the thing. It's threatening to them, so they've got to find a solution. Again, it's down to the more mature one that's happy in their faith, just to say, okay, that's where you're at. It's so much simpler when people are like that with you, even if they hold a faith belief, and then you can rub along with them. Whereas people who are like, no, you're this, you've made these decisions for these reasons, they know you better than you know yourself. It just gets a bit galling, doesn't it?
Yeah,
So.
it's a little bit challenging, and as you say, the person who says, "Huh, okay, that's interesting. We still on for coffee on Tuesday?"
Hmm.
Right?
They're the better.
That's a human being that I want to know.
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, um, it's the parents who are told by their child that they're lesbian.
Mm.
And, the parents can have a moment of silence on that and say, okay, cool. We still going on the road trip?
Mhm.
Right? If you can do
Correct
that,
answer.
right, that is the right. That's the only right answer.
It's the
I could do
Yeah.
any other answer is wrong.
Yeah.
It
Exactly.
is just the wrong answer. There is no right answer that tries to uh, vilify uh, this or that tries to reverse this decision or that refuses to accept it in some way or tie this idea to your humanity in some negative way. You were a decent human being when you were a believer, but now you're an atheist. Now I have to reassess what you are. No, you
And that's
don't.
that's the first thing you notice stepping out into the secular thing and having secular friends. Are they're the ones that are much cooler about the whole thing, or who accept you for where you are and don't have all this baggage to throw at you. And they're not trying to convert you. They're not trying to change you. They're so much more accepting, and that's how you become in terms of you can be like, oh, okay, people can be in different places, and it's not so binary and that's what's freeing about it, and that's why people report being happier. So yeah, and
Right.
Christians don't like to hear it, but just accept it.
And, there,
People,
and
don't
there's a
worry.
reason that they
If you believe
told.
God, believe He's bigger than these little issues, um, and you'll be fine. Just accept your friend who's come out just it's all a journey. Don't worry about it. Just chill out.
Yeah, and you can know almost for 100% certainty that when someone comes out, whatever the out thing is, you are the last person to know. They've already told all of their friends that they know would accept them. They weren't worried about them. They were worried about you. So just think about that for a moment. And then don't immediately start doing the things that justify their worry.
Many people saw me mention my divorce and think that that is the thing that did me in, as if I was mad at God for letting me get divorced in the first place. And so I'm selfish or was demanding God to gimme, gimme, gimme. This kind of psychologizing and Monday morning motivation speculation really is something that can make people like me stop wanting to talk to our church friends. My divorce wasn't the cause or even the reason for my deconversion. It was more like a catalyst, not the cause. I didn't lose my faith because I got divorced. Like, God, if you were real, I wouldn't be divorced. No, that would be shallow and honestly a silly reason.
It wouldn't be shallow and it wouldn't be silly for the reasons I gave before. And especially for a person who has been on their knees for hours a day praying that God help them find the right person. Right. So it's not shallow and silly. It would be actually an act of unfaith to not believe that God would do it for you.
I mention my divorce because it's an event that made me rip off a bunch of Band-Aids and come out of hiding to confront a lot of very sinful and shameful aspects about myself and my life. My divorce forced me to confront myself and how I handled abuse and infidelity and how being a victim of circumstance had changed me into someone I didn't recognize and I was ashamed of being. It was actually in that process of reconstruction and healing and wrestling with who I was and who I wanted to be that I lost my faith and belief. There were lots of things that actually changed my beliefs and my convictions. And I'll explain those probably as time goes on. My divorce, though, wasn't one of them. It was more like D-Day, the event that started the turning of the tide. That's why comments like those that I'm hearing, they may create a swallowable narrative for some, but they just make my eyes roll. I only mentioned my divorce because it was a watershed issue that opened my eyes to just how miserable and depressed I was, and that something had to change.
Right. The term he used there, you might hear it again from me, and I will not credit it. I will pretend like I made it up. It's a swallowable narrative. It's, the Christians who do this sort of thing do this for themselves. They have to tell themselves a story about why this happens. So they have one or two plot points that they apply to everybody who walks away. And you can just see it on the internet. Every time, some preacher walks away or some popular Christian singer, music minister walks away, these plot points come out. This swallowable narrative that Christians present as if to say, yeah, I know where they are coming from. That explains everything. And what they're telling themselves a story that doesn't match the reality of the person actually walking away.
I also went to Christian counseling and worked really hard on myself to be a man I could be proud of and who my sons can be proud of. Confident, hardworking, truthful, now almost to a fault, in touch with my emotions, and not just my emotions, my deep, unstated motivations for things, and refusing to hide or isolate or walk in the shadows, to ironically always walk in the light, as it were. For the past 2 years, I've become that man, and I honestly am unexplainably comfortable in my own skin in ways I never had been before, and I'm passionate about life and motivated and content again. What was weird, however, was that the more I healed and became more confident and at peace with who I am, I also noticed that the ministerial promises of the Bible seemed further and further from reality for me. That tension bothered me. A very strong cognitive dissonance set in. I begged and cried and asked God to to make me more like Jesus, to love him more, to know him more, to have the Spirit convict me, etc. But the more I did that, the less faith I had, because it started to feel that those are things that I shouldn't have to beg God for. Like a child shouldn't have to beg their parents for love or care. They should not have to beg for a loaf of bread instead of a rock, a fish instead of a poisonous serpent. My faith was diminished, though. My faith diminished, though, that until finally about 7 months ago, I quite consciously had none left. And again, let me be clear.
7 months before this video was done, he consciously had no more faith. I had mentioned 2 months before, but that is apparently not right. 7 months where he consciously had no faith. Also, I just wanted to say I've been there, Tyler. I have been there when I have prayed for things like wisdom and peace and faith. Give me more faith and understanding of your word and more orientation toward what you want. I've given those prayers with the same results of I'm not asking for cars.
Exactly. And it's not asking, it's begging.
Yeah,
That's
I'm begging for the stuff that you tell me that I should want. I want it like nobody's business. And the more it didn't come, the less faith I had. Because that's the stuff that faith is built on, right? And so if you were begging for a clean heart, say, create in me a clean heart, and something that you're struggling with in your heart doesn't get better, you have to wonder, okay, wait a minute. I can't ask for a more pure and honest prayer. I can't do better here. And so if I don't get this, I don't know what else to do. Where do I go from here? I mean, if I'm praying for more faith and I end up with less faith, that's just going to act on me having even less faith. So I've been there. I've been there. I know that you have too. I know that the people that we talk to on a regular basis have all been there and have all said the same thing. Did you have anything to add to that?
No, other than we really have all been there. We've all tried to even pray for the right things with the right motives, just like he says. And you're just out of ideas. You're just like, I think that's why I got to a point where I was just like, well, I'm just going to be. I'm just going to be. That's all I can do right now is just doing the being thing. Because I'm out of ideas, I'm out of prayers, I'm out of faith, I'm out of all of it. So, for a long time, all I could do was the Lord's Prayer, because I just was like, that's all we were told to do. So let's just stick to that for a bit. I can't, if I start thinking about other things, it gets too complicated, and it reminds me just how much it's not happening and not working. And yeah, and eventually you just say, this isn't making any difference. And it's when you wake up to that, you're like, I think I might put this to bed for a while. Yeah. And then the being's actually quite good, and it's a lot easier, and there's no striving with it. And so you kind of gravitate to more to be that, because we're human. We need to see progress. We need to see goals achieved a little bit. You can't just keep people hanging in the dark with no progress, with no prayers answered, with no discernible anything for too long. You just have to do something, or else God's designed it really badly. So just be, mate. He just needs to do a bit of being and not worrying. He's still in the striving stage, man. He just needs to just be.
I really liked when you said you revert to the Lord's Prayer. I mean, say a few Our Fathers. You can't screw that one up, right? I mean,
Exactly. It covers all the bases.
Right.
The food, you got to get the food in. Give us our daily bread.
I've tried to pray with my own words and my own heart. That's not working. Let me just do this one.
Just going to crib the other guy. 2,000 years ago, it must have been good for some reason. No.
Yeah. Not that I want the comments to go in this direction. Lord knows we've talked it to death, but in retrospect, I feel like maybe I should have prayed for a pool table.
I wasn't asking God for some miracle or private revelation. I didn't think that I was working and striving, and so I deserved it. I didn't need manna in the wilderness or writing on the wall. For those who seem to think that I'm letting feelings drive actions, ask yourself, what do you mean as a Christian when you say that God is your comfort? Is God your comfort if you're in fact not comforted?
Good question.
Give the boy a peanut. That's fantastic. That's exactly what it is. Like, what difference does it make? What actual difference does this praying do to you?
Right. There has to be some kind of discernible, measurable thing that says this prayer is working, even if it's just the good feeling in your heart that you're comforted. If you're not even getting that, you got to get out.
Not just not getting it, you're actually feeling way worse because you're not getting it, and that's causing another layer of suffering, which is completely needless to the problem. It's you got your problem, and then the praying about the problem, and then the fact that the prayer is not being answered. So it's just accumulating issues, and it's so nice to let it go and just be.
Just be.
Is it too emotional to desire to be like Christ? There's a weird inconsistency at the core of the Christian apologetics and theology community. The longing to be tightly logical and rational and have no feelings and emotion drive anything, except when it's not. And you're told that you cannot justify things logically and you shouldn't read outside of the Bible and you should just have faith. And then it's also comfortable saying that conversion is by the experience of the Holy Spirit, and we have confidence by this experience of the inner witness to our hearts by the Spirit. So it is experiential to its core. But when experience doesn't line up to reality, then you shouldn't let experience inform you. It's odd, and that became very loud in my thinking.
You were about to say something?
I just said it's all over the place, isn't it?
It is.
Which is exactly. Yeah, it's this, it's not that, it's that with a pinch of salt. It's just poor guy. Just let it go. It'll take you a few years to walk away from that. I mean, it really will. All this. It's horrendous.
Look, I'm still working through it, honestly. So, and it's been quite a while for me. I don't think that you ever fully get over it, but it's very interesting to see people when they're at the beginning of their journey out the door, how similar the experiences are. And he's much more eloquent than a lot of people who talk about this. Of course, he's reading from a prompter, and he's probably took 3 months to write this. But he's very eloquent and well put together. But at the end of the day, he's saying the stuff that we all said. Every one of us. Christians take note at the similarities of these stories.
It's like for decades, I refused to let experience and my own being play any part in the data set. But I read the Bible, read the Psalms, read Jeremiah and Lamentations. Christianity in this regard can be strangely inconsistently myopic. At the one hand, entirely experiential. And on the other hand, you shouldn't let experience motivate you at all. Sometimes it's all about experience. Sometimes it castigates it to the outer darkness. It seemed to me that if God did not want me near him or did not see fit to comfort me, why should I keep fighting for it? I had a pain.
Yeah, a good question.
Correct. I mean, that's the first sanity in all of it, isn't it? Is when you start saying enough's enough. This is like abuse. I'm just fighting for something I'm not seeing any result to. It's okay to walk away. It's okay. You need to give yourself the permission to do it, because it's hard to do that, because you've been told you have to fight for it and you will be tested, and so it takes a bit of abuse before you get there,
Yeah,
but you will.
it's very much a Stockholm syndrome kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
You're
Yeah.
so busy trying to please your captor,
Mm-hmm.
you just can't think straight, and you've lost perspective. The fact that this is your captor.
Tension between how strong my head believed the theology and what I thought the Bible affirmed, and how much, or rather, how vanishingly little faith I had left, if any at all. And I struggled with that tension a lot. Was I lying? No. Was I struggling and finding out what I believed? Absolutely. But at the end of it all, I just stopped fighting it, or even caring about it truthfully. I realized that I was not fighting for God or anything noble like that. I was striving with and even at times against God or the concept of God I had in my mind. I get the nobility of striving against sin and the devil and fighting for the kingdom and all that and never giving up. But should I have to fight for a relationship with God, especially if the promises are true that He is to be our comforter, our rock, our place of great shelter, the lover of our souls? I find myself almost saying back to God in His own words, if a child was saying that they didn't even know if my child was saying that they didn't even know if I loved him and was begging to know me and to be near me, I wouldn't hesitate to comfort him in ways that he felt comforted. If me, being fallen and broken and sinful as a father, know that, how much more should you, my heavenly Father? And yet
Amen to
that
that.
comfort never came.
Amen.
In fact, the more I worked and I strived to make sure I had no barriers in the way, again, I wasn't working thinking that He owed me things, but I was doing all the things that in Pascalian ways you're supposed to do to rekindle your faith. The more I did that, the more obvious it became that not only was comfort or Christ-likeness or sanctification or being near God, not only was none of that coming, but it wouldn't be coming.
So let me just observe here. There are Christians, and we know many of them, who would say that they have an active relationship with God in such a way that they not only know He exists, but they feel His presence all the time. He indwells within them, and they have this kind of nonverbal, closer than verbal relationship. And I will just tell you that when I was a Christian, anyway, I was envious of that kind of Christian and that kind of testimony. I don't know if I believed it, but I was certainly envious of it because that's what I wanted to have. And I did not have that. I never had that, and I certainly don't experience it now. And so, Christians, when you make your best effort to convert and persuade, you cannot do this by talking about your special relationship with God. You have to acknowledge the fact that we don't have that. And so, if anything, it's more alienating to us because what you're saying is God loves you and wants deep relationship with you, but not with me. You've
There's
got to
definitely
you've got to come up with an answer for that. And you've got to quit pretending like this relationship is out there for everybody. No, it's not. Tyler is standing right here telling you it is not. And you've got to do better.
But these people definitely exist, and just like we don't like to have our experience invalidated, you have to accept that that's what they're experiencing. So either God is like that, and He's picking and choosing a few to give, the intimate relationship for, or somebody's deluded somewhere along the line. And given the fact we probably had inklings of what we felt was the relationship, and we can probably see those as just internal dialogues and things that were going on and beliefs and things that were driving us, then have we got the upper hand a little bit to say, well, I think we know what your experience might be, and we can explain it. So we still don't believe that you're really having these experiences.
Yeah.
In some ways, though I would never say I would.
You would. Trust me, you would. You have.
I would say, yeah, I have said. But, ultimately, I think I do believe they're experiencing it. I just don't I don't ultimately think it's the same cause as to why they're experiencing.
They're experiencing something. They're experiencing something that is creating a euphoric relationship kind of feeling. I don't deny that. I wish I had some of that. I don't have any of that. I've never had any of that. I am happy that they have that, whatever the cause. Glad they got it. If they got it from doing crack, great. Enjoy your life for the next 10 years until you die. But you will have this feeling of relationship with something transcendent. Good for you. But the more you boast about this transcendent relationship, the more you have to explain why I don't have it and why there was nothing that I could do to get it. All that does is confirm to me, if your God exists, even if he exists, he doesn't want anything to do with me. And so if I thought he existed, if I believed you, that would just alienate me further from a God that I believed in.
Though they would tend to try and find a little thing as to why it might not have been happening for you. Some unrepented sin, or
they have unrepentant sins. I'm sorry, that will never work. There is nothing that they could do to convince me in that sense, because they are as human as I was then. They're not better than I was.
No.
So, whatever they would say, you've got some unrepentant sin, blah, blah, blah. You've got some unrepentant sin, and yet God lives in your heart. So shut up.
That silence became very stark and very loud. I would sit in church and feel like a hypocrite when we would sing of God's comfort and love and how we adored him. I kept trying and hoping to fake it till you make it and make Pascal proud. But at some point, it almost felt like the toxic relationships we hear about, where someone's always demanding love and devotion, but never returns the favor. Says they love you, but doesn't actually show you that you have any value to them. But that's just it, right? I would expect on the Christian message something. Surely something from my Heavenly Father, who's supposed to infinitely love and care for and protect and uphold his children. Surely God would know what would at least be noticeable to me, right? Enough to keep me from walking out. I wasn't expecting grand miracles or healing. I wasn't praying for stuff, for things, for prosperity, or even for favorable circumstances. I just wanted him.
Same here. I can tell you that it got to a point for me, and this is a little bit ashamed of it, but when you get desperate enough, this is the kind of stuff you go to. It's like, okay, God, I believe you're there, but I'm not getting the feedback I need. I'm swimming in doubts. I've been praying. I've been studying all this, so I'm leaving. I'm walking out, but if you just give me a sign, any sign, a little sign, gallstones, whatever you got, you can punish me, but just do so in a way that I know it's you.
Yeah.
So, anything. I would rather be maimed and know that you're here than not maimed and left in this doubt. That is exactly the level of mental illness that I got to. Just anything. Just give me something that I can interpret. I'll take anything.
Yeah, anything. Exactly. Yeah. For a long time, and it's not just a week, is it? It's just it's a long time. So when people say you weren't really a Christian, it does provoke a need to deck them badly when they say things like that. So just be aware most people have gone through this kind of deconversion. When you speak to them, they have tried all these things. And if you're lucky because you get the warm feels when God talks to you, good for you. You're in contact with the God of the universe. Good. Doesn't happen for everyone. That's a problem. That's a problem for you to explain, not for me. And and
They
don't.
have no
People
idea how
walk away.
hard we've tried. We,
No.
oh God. And I can say we because I know that all of this community went through similar stuff. I'm not special here. Um,
No.
I do not have the delusion that I did more or worked harder. This is a common story. We tried so hard and we were willing to accept so little, and it didn't happen.
Yeah, so little. Which is why when they say, "Well, what would it take for you to come back?" It's like that ship has
Yep.
sailed. It is gone. You had your
What
chance.
you should have asked is
This is
what
the
would
ship
it have
then.
taken to keep us? And the answer would have been so little.
Yeah,
So
so
little.
Just like he promised. And God could have, just like I would for my sons. But crickets. For years, crickets. While I was reading the Bible every day, memorizing more scripture than I had in years, praying and singing hymns about how he was my comforter, and sitting in church and home groups and counseling, just crickets.
Yep.
And so during that time, even having no faith left, what little commitment and mental fortitude for the thing called Christianity I had slowly atrophied and died.
So here's a little bit of a personal insight into me. A lot of people know that I used to be a musician. I was a singer. I was a singer. I was a child singer. I was reasonably talented, and so I sang. I became pretty well known as a Christian singer in churches. Everybody always wanted to hear that. And I was a musician, though in my church, ironically enough, we couldn't use musical instruments. It was all a cappella. So I
The
learned
irony.
to use my voice, but I also learned to play a piano and 10 or 15 other instruments while I was at it.
God gave you the gift of music and then refused
Yeah.
to let you have it. Yeah,
So
not ironic.
there came a time, especially after my faith went, that I made a conscious decision that I was no longer going to pursue music, and I had a moderate career in it. I was no longer going to pursue music. I didn't want to be known as a singer anymore, because all of my singing up to that point was associated with the religious. I I built my voice on telling God how great He was, uh,
I would
and there was such an association with that that I came to the decision. That wasn't the only thing, mind you, but I came to the decision that I don't want people to know me for my entertainment value. I wanted people to listen to me because I had something to say. And I don't want to denigrate entertainers because I think we need entertainers who are competent at their craft. But I just chose for me, uh, I wanted to I wanted to affect change in a more real way. And I also found that I couldn't sing and write music and perform without it being so associated with religion in my own mind. I kind of rebelled against myself, and I just couldn't do it anymore. So, when he talks about, the time he spent singing, and I don't know if he was actually a singer or just, someone who sang in the pew, but I just, that kind of triggered all that in me, and I wanted to just share that a little bit. I had a very different path laid out for me.
But
that I walked
that's
away
another
from.
example of what it robbed you of. I mean, you probably were, a talented singer, and you could have enjoyed that
I was
aspect
offered
of
a
life.
contract.
It ruined it for you. It's not. It's just not good enough. This religion stuff to wreck that kind of thing for people for life, or means that you've got difficulty in reconnecting with that aspect of you because it brings up too many memories of But it's just so sad that it wrecks all sorts of things like that for people. So when again, sometimes that's why we're done with it, and that's why we don't want to go revisiting these things. That's why we've given everything, and it's just like you can't see what would change in the future. It's like I've done the begging, I've done the trying everything, I've done the clearing out of all my sins, and all, I've done them all, and I just don't want to go back there. So don't give me this nonsense about real seekers, because I've done it. The ship has sailed. It's gone. It's over. It's ruined too many things, and we're human, and we're going to have to rebuild a life in a different way. And this idea that you have to keep seeking in this area all the time is just nonsense. People are done with it, and I think he gets to that point as well. At some point, he's just like, "I'm done. I've looked at it. I've done. It's okay to call time. It's absolutely fine. Give yourself permission to call time, to move on, and to build a different life. And if you one day come back to it for one reason in a different instantiation, then fine. But don't worry about it so much anymore. It's if there's a God, he's bigger than all this nonsense. But
Yeah. There's probably some form of theistic religion that I could get into. I mean, there's probably some form of it, some version of it. Maybe it doesn't exist now, but I'm theoretically one probably could exist. I've done some thought experiments on this subject to try to come up with a god I could believe in, or assuming some type of deistic god, some kind of religion that I could believe in. I haven't been entirely successful in that, but not entirely unsuccessful either. And I do think that there are varieties of religious thought that could be helpful and useful. It's just that that's not the Christianity that we know. Here, let's
no,
let's finish this
which is
up.
why it's easier to define it by what it isn't, in terms of it's just not the conservative evangelical God, who's very condemning and sends you to hell and all those kind of things. Like, there's no problem in just not believing in those things. But anything else, have you watched the episode of Unbelievable this week with John Steingard and Josh Porter? I think his name is.
I
Have you
have
watched that?
not, but Steingartner, isn't he a deconvert from a music
Yeah,
ministry? Yeah, okay.
high profile guys that deconverted, and it's an episode on deconversion. Very good episode that and Josh Porter seems to be a very progressive, both progressive and orthodox, which seems to be the two things that rub along now to be a bit more trendy in the kind of Christian world. Everyone's going, oh, yes, evangelical Christianity, let's put that behind us. Isn't that embarrassing? Oh, no, we don't believe that. We're deconverting from this. But now we're actually moving towards, orthodoxy and what lots of beliefs are made from, and what Christianity drew from a great tradition. But I'm also progressive and LGBT affirming and all those things. So it kind of seems to be moving in that direction, because that was the discussion, and that's where they had a lot of common ground between the pastor who was still believing in it and John Steingard, who's just like, I'm done with all of it, really. So it's an interesting talk. I'd recommend it. And again, Steingard says something very interesting to me personally, but he says that once you leave these sort of situations, you'll go either down probably one or the other. You'll become more and more hard materialistic, materialism in the metaphysical sense, or you'll become more of an idealist, and he's landed on panpsychism. So it seems to does cut both ways afterwards. You tend to move one way or the other, and maybe you come back to kind of floaty progressive type of beliefy Christianity, but you never go back to an evangelical Christian
Yeah,
framework.
it
I don't think.
happens so seldom. It's not that it never happens, but it's very seldom. It's very rare.
Really, I don't think you've properly deconverted if you go back to an evangelical conservative Christianity within hell and heaven and Calvinism and all. Just no way. I don't think you can do it.
It's hard to
You learn
do.
nothing. You've learned nothing. You need to start again. Back to square one.
Let's finish up this particular story. Like I said, we've got another couple of weeks of it, and I think you're gonna actually enjoy where he goes after
Okay.
this. But yeah, there's a lot to talk about here, which is one of the reasons I'm very interested in moving the conversation with a capital C, more in this direction.
I had not only lost faith, but I had lost the will to have faith. I had lost faith in faith.
And it's just what you just said.
And once that changed, lots quickly shifted, like a collapsing of a house of cards. I felt like I was holding together a broken glass by sheer exertion of the will. And once I stopped trying to force it, it finally broke. Or rather, it was already broken, and I finally just succumbed to that fact and let the pieces fall where they would. I didn't care about being orthodox anymore, which means I stopped caring about being theologically consistent to that system. Or more accurately, I no longer felt the severe need to believe something in order to be consistent with orthodoxy. Understandably, I found that those were apparently the only reasons I believed a lot of what I did. The Trinity, the deity of Jesus, inspiration, inerrancy, judgment, hell, that the creator of all the universe would want the blood of bulls and goats and even his own son, and an arcane ritual of appeasement for our sin brought on by a fruit and a single act of rebellious exploration and with seemingly cosmic significance thousands of years ago.
Okay, so I'm promise I'm trying to take bigger chunks. We're going to get through this. I just had to pause there for a moment and say, yeah, I remember when I came to this realization too that this is silly.
It's
A
just
lot of the stuff that I believed as gospel truth and underpinning the reality of the universe is just silly. This whole Garden of Eden story, I'm ashamed to this day that I ever believed it. How do
exactly.
people believe it?
Well, you could believe it in the kind of it's an archetypal kind of story myth to you can believe it that way. So I think again, you don't have to have
That's
believed
not
it
how I
really.
believed it, and I can guarantee you that's not how he believed it. We
No, I know.
believed
No.
it. Come on.
I know. But Christianity will end up, it'll all be loosey goosey. It's all just a beautiful book. That's just sacred text. It's just
Snakes never talked. They never walked. They never. This is not. Wake
No, I
up.
know. But that's where it's going to have to go to survive because everybody is deconverting, week after week, high profile deconversions to get out of this
Magic
evangelical
tree.
mind. It
Magic
can't survive.
mushrooms. They ate the magic mushroom and the universe fell apart. Come on. Come on.
Which
They would have done
admittedly
if they
then
had got magic
kind
mushroom,
of saps the need for the resurrection also. So all of it. Like Laplace retorted to Napoleon, I just have no need of it. Once my faith was gone, I just didn't care anymore, and it all just felt away. And then there was silence again, but not deafeningly loud silence like that of God's seeming disinterest. Peaceful silence.
Mm-hmm.
I honestly thought I would be sad or I'd miss it. It's what I had been scared of, the quiet. But I just felt relieved, honestly. The struggle was over, like being called home from the front.
Every time.
It was calming and tranquil even, cathartic and possibly a little invigorating.
Mm-hmm.
For a lot of people, losing their faith is the thing that starts them down the road of finding themselves. And so it's understandably incredibly hard because they lose their faith and then have to go through the process. I was the opposite. I feel like I spent the last 2 years finding myself and healing from past trauma and being a man I truly love being. So losing my faith was the last thing to change, and it was more of a shedding off than a giving up. Some have asked me now what I do with Jesus, which I'm not sure, to be honest, in all the ways. And I understand why they ask the question. It's a central question. I haven't worked it all out, and honestly, I'm somewhat apathetic to do so. I'm going to let the chips fall where they may as I explore this worldview. Even with that, as I explore and re-examine and think about what my worldview even is and entails these days, I know that I don't believe in the Trinity, the divinity of Jesus, or the atonement or the resurrection. The concepts don't make sense to me anymore. And I think we're largely propped up by faith and the need to be orthodox and consistent within that system.
Right. In other words, they never made sense. They never made sense. They don't make sense to Christians now. They're just knowledge points that Christians have and that they can say and repeat. No one understands the Trinity. Okay. They talk about the difference between comprehension and apprehension. You apprehend it, but you don't understand it. Okay, well, then you don't even really apprehend it. It's so ridiculous. And the moment you give up on trying to keep that house of cards standing, it just feels so much better. And you can just acknowledge, okay, that I don't understand it. Furthermore, I don't have to put any more muscular work to try to understand it or pretend to understand it. This is nonsense. It has always been nonsense. And I no longer have to, try to hold on to mysteries. So this is what he's saying.
And he says, let the chips fall where they may. That's where you get to. And it's just like, I've had enough. It's done. And this is why this idea of real seeker, that you have to continue picking at this scab and constantly looking at it again in different ways, is just nonsense. There's another example of a human, it's not just me, that just thinks, that's it, I'm done. This just doesn't make sense. I'm just finished. And it's okay to be there. And you can be free and happy with that decision and at peace. It's totally, give yourself permission to be there. You don't need to keep seeking forever. That's a nonsense idea.
Okay, don't get me started.
Even after my faith dropped and I felt the beliefs slipping away, I still chose to consciously affirm them. Again, Pascal's wager and viewing faith as a volitional activity and not purely a cognitive one drove that a little bit. And by the way, this is off the cuff. I don't think that it's necessarily wrong to believe things in order to be consistent with an overall system that you think is true. So please don't take that as a negative argument. It's just that I no longer was there. Now, some of you will think that
what he's talking about is this system of beliefs, this house of cards. And you say, well, because this, then this. This belief belongs in this broader ecosystem of other beliefs. And so because I am in this ecosystem, I have to affirm each of these beliefs, even if I don't understand them and find them hard to explain. I know that these things are part of this belief ecosystem. And, it's when you let go of the ecosystem, you can let go of the beliefs that don't make sense, that you were only holding because you were in that ecosystem. So that's kind of where that was. I can give you an example of one of those. For me, it was homosexuality, because I was very anti-homosexuality. But I was only anti-homosexuality because God hates fags. Every Christian knows that, right? At least they did in my communities. Not all. I hovered around in liberal communities as well, but the people that I grew up around that knew that, and that was the only reason. But I had thought about it many times in my young life, and I asked myself, well, why does God hate fags? What exactly is wrong with homosexuality? God hate fags is, by the way, a thing for those of you who are too young. Fred Phelps, there was a whole thing. Look it up. Why is homosexuality so bad, though? I mean, I can see where some people would find it icky, but I don't see where anyone should find it evil. It didn't make sense in that regard. And so I remember fairly distinctively that one of the first things I let go of when I let go of Christianity was any animosity toward homosexuals or the idea of homosexuality. It's like, well, okay, I guess that's okay now. because I've left that ecosystem of beliefs. I don't need to hold on to that anymore.
No. Garden of Eden, Trinity, homosexuals, done. That's what you let go of in that order.
Yeah.
I was
And then
lying
you start
during that time.
up
Go ahead.
mushroom,
Yeah.
LSD, maybe. Why not?
No, I never went that route. But yeah, there are actually a lot of people who walk away from religion and who abstained from certain things only because of religion end up going down a very dangerous road, because then they want to try all of the things that they abstain, because they were never given a good reason to abstain. And let me just tell you, because God doesn't like it is not a good reason
No.
to
No.
abstain. If you want your children to abstain from certain things like drugs, for instance, don't tell them that they should abstain because God doesn't like it. Because when they stop believing in God, then they're going to go to the drugs. You've got to give them a better, more sustainable reason than that.
Mm-hmm.
Time. I don't think that I was, but I understand the reaction. But it's weird. For many, you think that I should stay committed and keep trusting in God by sheer will of power and going to church and praying, even though I don't believe it anymore, which is exactly what I did. But for others, having done that, I was lying.
Okay, this is what I talked about at the beginning. So he's for 7 months he conscientiously was without faith, and I understand that. And he was still going on shows, and he was still towing the Christian line, and he was still evangelizing and still doing all of this stuff. He was lying. It is true that he was lying. So I I want to make it clear what I am supporting and what I'm not supporting. He was lying. And I make no bones about that. When I was walking out the door, it's a process, and I knew that the process had, started long before I was walking out the door. I was preaching regularly, though. I was, you know, administering the communion and praying and worship leading and all that. And there were people close around me who knew kind of where I was. And I changed the kind of preaching that I did. So I did the kind of preaching then that I could do now. I could preach very biblical, Christian-friendly sermons now that actually don't have any religious content to them. And so I got pretty good at that sort of thing. I would probably make a good UU preacher. So I got fairly good at that. But there came a time when I stopped, for instance, administering the Lord's Supper. I couldn't say the words anymore because I didn't believe them. And I knew I didn't believe them. In fact, I had stopped taking the Lord's Supper. I just let the tray pass by me. I'm sure people noticed, but no, I'm not going to do that because it doesn't have any meaning for me. I don't understand it. It's archaic. It's ridiculous. Am I really forced to pretend to be drinking the blood of a person who died? Is that what we're doing here? Really? Am I pretending that there are magic powers associated with this pantomime? I'm not going to do it. I can't do it anymore. When I was asked to pray before I stopped praying altogether, I would pray things like, I would let my doubts be known in my prayers. I I became pretty bold about that, and then eventually they still continue to ask me to pray, and I just said no, I'm not. I can't do it. Can't do it. Not going to do it.
Got to take yourself off like an elephant and die in a corner somewhere when this is happening. It's much better to do it behind closed doors. I don't know how you.
I actually would walk out of the services during the worship portion of the service, and I would sometimes sit in and listen to the sermon, but I just couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't sing the songs.
It. Literally, you can't stomach it any longer. You just have to get out.
Right, but it was the hypocrisy that I couldn't do anymore. It wasn't just the content; it was the pretending like I'm still a part of this. And I couldn't encourage someone else to do it by my participation because I was viewed as a leader there. And so, my doing these things would encourage other people to do these things. So I just couldn't do it anymore. And so I really wish that Tyler here had gone down that kind of path. And I think that there are paths that you can go down that do not force you into hypocrisy. But where I am willing to forgive him a bit for this is before you get to where I was, where I couldn't do it, you have to get to where he was, where you made yourself do it. And so you didn't believe it, but you still led the prayers. You didn't believe it, but you still led the worship. You didn't believe it, but you still did the preaching. You still taught the classes. You didn't believe it, and there's that place, that transitional place where you find themselves. And the thing that I would say about Christians and Christianity is that Christian leaders always find themselves in a valley of doubt. At some point, they find themselves in a valley of doubt. That does not mean that they take a sabbatical. A lot of preachers don't have a sabbatical option. You don't preach, you don't get paid. So you don't not teach that Bible class that you're tapped to teach just because this morning you woke up with some doubts. That is simply not how the reality of church work works. And so you find yourself in a position where you have to continue for a while, and you have to find that transitional point where you can transition out of it. Drew Sokol. Do you remember Drew Sokol?
Yeah, didn't he do Hiding in Plain Sight?
He did Hinge with Corey.
Hinge, yeah.
Yeah, with Corey, what's his name? But Drew, I got a chance to have him on the show. His story so touched me. I never had the experience that he had, but he talks about, preaching at a big church in, I think it was New York. And he was tapped to preach that day. And he was up there, and he'd been preaching for a while. He was up there, and he looks around, and he's, in mid-speech, and he just gets sick, nauseous to the point of not being able to go on, and he flees the pulpit. And
I missed that.
Yeah. He just physically couldn't do it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I understand that would, when you get to that place. So you still have this responsibility. Your employer still is expecting you to do your damn job. And you can't just say, well, this morning I woke up and I didn't feel it, so I'm not going to do it. You can't do that with any job, right? That's actually not the most integrity-filled thing that you could do. But Drew had pushed himself to the point where he physically and emotionally literally couldn't do it. And Tyler here, even though he went through a period of 7 months of sheer hypocrisy, this is a longer transition period than maybe for most people, but it is common to have a transition period where you don't believe, but you're still doing the things that you did.
Yeah.
And if you don't understand that, you were never in a position of high enough responsibility to understand it. But when you have that responsibility, you just can't quit cold turkey because you're having a bad faith moment. So it's not reasonable to expect him to have done it. And he was, in fact, doing all of the things that the people around him would have told him to do, to keep doing it, to keep praying it, to do your show, but you pray for more faith. Don't quit. Don't give up. Don't give the devil a toehold in your life by stopping. He did all of that, and he was faithful to that. And so I do think that even though he was a lying hypocrite, he was the kind of lying hypocrite that Christianity forced him to be. And every one of us goes through that period. Once again, it may not be that long, but we all go through the same kind of period.
Yeah, I think the transition period is at least that 11 months for me, where I think you're still swimming in that water. It's only when people ask you to, lead an alpha group, because I don't know if you've got those alpha groups, but they're like basic Bible conversion. Nicky Gumbel from the Holy Trinity. It's a big thing in the UK, basically, alpha. It's only then that when people started saying, can you lead one of those? And I was just like, do you know what? No, because I don't even know what it is I believe. And you sit on the sidelines for a very long time. But if you've got a podcast going, what do? You can't just turn it off. You don't know if you're just having a week-long, month-long crisis of faith. You might come back to it, but it's just, I don't have an issue with him faking it for a while. He probably was faking it to make it. And you have to do that part of it.
Right.
It's not that binary. You don't. It's the flick switching is now for him. It's not before.
Right. Right. The switch, flicking the switch is not a flick. It's a very slow process. And eventually the light is off. But it's very slow. It's less a switch and more of a dimmer. Eventually you realize, there's no more light now. All right, let's finish up.
By the way, that's just another thing you Christians should probably put some thought into smoothing out that inconsistency. So, Jesus, in short, if I had to go with the classic Lewis trilemma taxonomy, I'd probably put him in the lunatic category, but not actually a lunatic, not a crazy person, because that term is far too strong and negative and almost creates a false dichotomy that you either think he was right or a crazy person or lying and he should be locked up. It's just that I don't think he was Lord, but I also don't think he was intentionally lying. So the only category that allows for sincere and a good man and wise and maybe even gifted, but not the Lord, is lunatic.
Or
in
legend.
that time and place, there were many people who believed they were divine, and Jesus may have been wrong about his calling and origin, but that doesn't mean, I think, that he was Looney Tunes or worthy of a padded cell, or that he was just lying for power or wealth or something. He was a good man who exhorted people to good living and care for the outcasts. The significance of that to life and world history cannot be overstated. At the end, I think the closest I have is that Jesus is an enigma. He defies clean classification, and that's okay. I just don't feel the need to resolve that puzzle anymore. But to the disappointment of many of you, I no longer believe that he was the divine Son of God or savior of my sins or is coming back on the clouds one day. So that's where I am right now. I don't have it all figured out or even most of the answers tied together in a neat bow. And I'm really truthfully content with that. I love my life and the people in my life. And if there is one thing I have learned through all of this, is that those who love me will continue to do so, whether I'm religious or not. I used to worry what people thought, and I would hide how I felt and what my struggles were, worried people would abandon me if they knew what lay within. But I found as I committed to never hiding, always being truthful and being upfront with my thoughts and my needs and fears, that my relationships with family and friends grew stronger and sweeter and more authentic. I learned I do not need to worry about losing the ones I love because love, real love, is malleable. It's resilient. It changes and grows with us as we find new ways to keep loving each other endlessly. So for those who are asking and trying to reconcile it all, you honestly don't need to. It's my journey, truthfully, not yours. You don't need to fight for me or defend me as some of you have, although I appreciate the care. And I understand, but you don't need to mourn for me. Again, I understand why some of you are. Some of you want to know what my beliefs are nowadays. And again, I'm just not sure. I'm not sure everything that I do or will believe, but it's become obvious what I don't. Though I don't entirely know what to do, as I said, with Jesus, It's not going to be filtered through with the Trinity or the hypostatic union or Lord and Savior. The tools aren't going to be in the inerrant scriptures or prayer. And who knows? If the universalists and the free grace folks are right, then there's nothing to fear anyways. Though fear has never really been a strong theological motivator for me, and maybe that's the problem. I don't know. I know that open theism is still nonsense, and so is atheism. As I said, I still believe in God. I still see no defeater for the arguments of classical theism or even tag or the grounds of rationality, still a compatibilist. But all of that's more akin to a kind of humanistic ethical theism. I also don't think the Bible teaches, I also think that the Bible teaches what I previously believed that it taught. I just don't believe it's true anymore. But I believe the Bible teaches what the Reformer said it does. Again, I lost my faith, not my ability or my mind to objectively read texts. I even still think that it's beautiful and significant and meaningful to values in society. And that's about the most I can say right now. So who knows? But likely my religion will be love and family and humanity and exploration and enjoyment of life, and which honestly seems more beautiful and open and even kind of magical to me now than it ever had before. It's real and crunchy, and I'm looking forward to every drip and drop of it. I appreciate the love and care of so many of you and know you all mean well. But many of you, again, seem to think that there's something right now in my current context that I struggle, and that we can talk it through and my faith will be restored. Unfortunately, I'm on the other side of the hurricane now, and my Christian ship is already tragically lost at sea. I swam and survived, but that wreckage is now in my past. I finally appreciate Henley's words, as cliche as it may be, for deconversion stories. Some will call them autonomy or pride, and I honestly get that from their view now. But I feel the weight and majesty of them like never before. Henley wrote, "It matters not how straight the gate, how charged with punishments the scroll. I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul." Thank you all for the years of love and support, and I hope that this does not negatively impact anyone's own journey as they explore their faith for themselves. I'm not trying to take anyone down with me by any means, nothing like that. I love you all, and for the last year, I'm finally walking comfortable and confident in my own self. This will likely be the first, the last, and therefore the only content I make in this autobiographical sense.
It's not.
And I look forward to getting back to making content about substantive issues, likely on some of the topics that did lead to my deconversion, but not about my deconversion itself. I hope many of you will stick around for that, but I understand if you don't. But for now, this is me. Hi, nice to meet you. Again, much love.
All right.
Hello. What I'm about to say has been...
Let's start again. All right. So I had one closing thought, and I will let you have the last word. I said earlier, there's no need to piece all of the stuff that you had in religion back together again, except secular instead of religion. And this is part of what I'm talking about, his sign off of what he believes is peace and love and family and good community. That's religion enough, and you don't have to replace all of those other broken pieces. It's not necessary, unless it is necessary for you. But one of the things that Christians have asked me over the years by way of challenge is, what do I replace it with then? What do I believe? And he's saying he doesn't know what he believes. I've been asked the same question. I guess I might believe some things, but I don't have a worldview. This infuriates Christians when I say this. I honestly do not have a worldview. Because to me, a worldview is just like Christianity. It's this house of cards that you build that ensures you, that secures you in the idea that you've got the answers to life's important questions. I don't have the answers to life's important questions. I don't even think that life has any important questions, to be perfectly honest with you. And I've let go of everything, including the notion that I need to have the answers to anything. I'm very comfortable with saying I don't know about a lot of things. And so in Christian debates, something like the origin of the universe, if God didn't do it, then what is your explanation? Well, I'm not a physicist. I don't have one. That doesn't mean that I have to believe in your God. I don't need an opposing worldview that gives me the answer to this question that may not even be valid, for all I know. I don't need it. I don't have to pretend to know anything about the origin of the universe. And so if your big push for conversion is that you at least have some kind of answer and I don't, you're going to lose. It's wasted time for you. I don't have an answer and I don't need an answer. The question isn't even relevant to me. I do not go through my day-to-day life looking at the tasks that I have in front of me, wondering how the universe began. It is simply a non-issue. And if that's kind of where you plant the flag for your God, I think you're planting it in the wrong place. And there aren't a lot of people that you're going to convince simply because they don't know. Listen to this well. Just because you don't know the answer to a question doesn't mean that the other person's answer is correct. Okay? I can epistemically look at your answer and say, I don't think I buy that. That doesn't make sense. And I don't have to have a better answer to do it. I can say, I don't know. And you should say that you don't know. And that doesn't diminish me. And it only diminishes you to the extent that you have a house of cards built on a worldview that you have to maintain and you have to pretend to have all the answers. It is so freeing to know that you don't have all the answers and that you don't have to pursue them. And you can just pursue life. I like having pets because they remind me that life can simply be lived. And you don't have to run yourself into insanity by trying to figure out how many stars there are in the sky or how they got there. You can just look at them and bay at the stars and the moon and live your best life. No God required. Sarah, the last word is yours.
So that's what you meant by no worldview. I think most people don't understand what you mean by that, because in that case, I totally agree with you, and I think you've articulated it well, that you can just be, and you can, not have the answers to everything. I mean, it should not come as a shock that my knowledge gaps are wide and far-reaching in most areas, and that's okay, and it's okay not to know it all. And I don't know why these people think they're going to figure it out. We've had millennia of people trying to figure these things out. You're probably not going to be the guy that does it. So just enjoy. And but I didn't realize that's what you meant by worldview. So I've learned something tonight, and I totally agree. Just experience and rest in God's love. No, not that.
in the God of your choosing or your making.
That's the one.
And with that, next week, another member of the four. I believe it is. I don't want to say. I'm gonna have to look at my list. it's,
Uh,
it's
one of the
Clint
Fab Four.
and you. I'm just trying to remember the order. Okay, I don't want to say because I might get it wrong, and then I'll offend one of the esteemed members of the four. I think it's Matt. Next week, it's either Matt or our very own Brian with a Y.
A big come down for Matt since he's just appeared on Unbelievable, but I'm sure he'll grace us with his
I'd like to
presence.
think it's a step up for Matt. He's he's stepping up to skeptics and seekers. He's become worthy of 4S.
Okay.
I sure hope
Okay.
he's not listening to any of this. I'm editing this out. I aspire to have a show that is actually worthy of Matt and worthy of the people who have agreed to be a part of it. So with that, we will see you next time. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
All